Hi, my name is Matthew Daughter. I'm the Executive Director of Santa Clara Valley Bird Alliance, and I want to talk about biodiversity, a healthy ecology, and the role of birds. Our headquarters are in Cupertino at McClellan Ranch, a small nature preserve in Cupertino. And it's a lovely place to visit all times of the year, fall, winter, spring, and summer. Our mission has been to promote the enjoyment, understanding, and protection of birds and other wildlife by engaging people of all ages in birding, education, and conservation. We like to say we've been inspiring people to care about birds since 1925, which means we're entering our centennial year. 100 years of conservation and community. We fulfill our mission a number of ways. We advocate for green spaces and healthy creeks. We fight to protect threatened species like these burrowing owls. We educate policymakers about the importance of dark skies to migrant species and animals of all forms. We have a robust education program which features in-class education. Many of our offerings are for Title I schools, and accompanied by outdoor learning, where we take school children to our local wetlands, sometimes for their first meaningful experience with nature. We have a variety of online classes recorded and also offered live. And we have more than 200 field trips each year open to the public. Many of those field trips are accessible for people with mobility concerns. We have seasonal bioblitzes, which is an interesting activity which is open to the public and requires no experience, where people utilize a mobile phone app called iNaturalist to document all the life forms found in a given area. On Wednesdays from April to June, we have egret office hours on Google Campus, where we show passersby the beautiful snowy egrets, great egrets, black-crowned-eyed herons, and great blue herons that nest in the sycamore trees on Google Campus. The fact is that 50 million people in the United States call themselves birders, and each of us cares deeply about the environment. Now, how do you recognize a healthy environment? Well, it's an ecology rich in diversity. And bird diversity is a good indicator of the overall health of the environment. It begins with good habitat, which provides food, water, shelter for the life forms that are there. From the tidal wetlands of Palo Alto Baylands, to the oak savanna Joseph D. Grant County Park, to the old growth woodland of Stevens Creek Park and Sanborn Park, to the signature chaparral slopes of Stevens Creek Park and Montebello Preserve, riparian woodland of Coyote Creek and Stevens Creek, and the farmlands in Coyote Valley. But the fact is that even your backyard, even your driveway, can provide habitat for life. Take this backyard here filled with many, many plants, attracting pollinators of various kinds, and where I used to live in this apartment in Palo Alto. These plants and flowers and bushes provide shelter or food, and they also attract pollinators, native bees, honeybees, bumblebees. Some of them forage nest in the ground, but they pollinate our plants, our food, like these tomatoes. But a habitat filled with native plants attracts even more pollinators, more insect life. That insect life produces caterpillars in abundance. Those caterpillars form the bulk of the food that is given to our songbird nestlings. So a healthy environment with lots of native plants is key to a healthy ecosystem. Let's meet a few of the local birds, and there are 418 species of bird found in Santa Clara County alone. Each of these pictures represents an entire family of birds found in Santa Clara County. Each of these tiles includes multiple members of those families. Now, when I show you the birds that we're going to talk about, I want you to look for and listen for connections that are implied by the birds and their life cycles that I describe. Acorn woodpecker, for example. It's famous for storing thousands of acorns in the bark of trees, usually dying trees. Oak trees is a favorite. And it'll protect these granaries, these storage areas, from other acorn woodpeckers, other colonies of woodpeckers, other animals. Like all woodpeckers, acorn woodpecker nests in holes that it digs. But it only uses those nest holes for one season, and then it abandons them, which means that 24 local bird species, other than the acorn woodpecker, can utilize those holes to make its nests. Chestnut-backed chickadee is one such bird. It's a small, familiar, adorable songbird that you probably have in your backyard, and if you have a feeder, you definitely have chickadees. It utilizes old woodpecker holes and natural knot holes. Western bluebird. Now, this is nesting in a nest box that we've set up at McClellan Ranch, but it actually prefers natural nest holes made by woodpeckers. Male and female look a little bit different. The male is more blue. The interesting thing is that bluebirds lay blue eggs. And the brilliant blue you see on a bluebird is not a pigment of any kind. It's actually caused by the same phenomenon that makes our sky blue. It's called the Rayleigh's scattering effect. Bewick's wren, small familiar bird, loud and boisterous, nests in woodpecker holes. White-breasted nuthatch also likes to nest in woodpecker holes, and it has the unique ability of songbirds to be able to climb up and down a tree trunk. Anna's hummingbird does not nest in cavities, but it does something else that's useful for an ecology. It's a pollinator, so it visits flowers to drink the sap, drink the nectar, and in so doing, it may often pull away with a little bit of pollen on its nose. The black phoebe benefits from the activities of a hummingbird because the hummingbird pollinating the plants produces more plants, which attracts more insects, and of course the black phoebe is a flycatcher, our most familiar, most common, and resident flycatcher. So it excels at sallying out and picking airborne insects out of the air, and it feeds its young. The spotted towhee is also an insectivore, but it also has a seed-crushing bill, which it uses to eat seeds, crush seeds. But its favorite way of finding food is to dig around in the underbrush, the leaf litter beneath trees. It searches for insects there and worms and other such things. Those trees, of course, are oftentimes our native oaks. Native oaks are a favorite location for our California scrub jay. So it's very fond of acorns to eat and also to cache. So it'll bury good, hearty, meaty acorns in the grass surrounding the trees, but it unfortunately often forgets where it places those acorns. So the California scrub jay is actually responsible for a lot of the natural re-oaking of the California oak chaparral, the oak savanna. Of course, all those acorns and all those oak trees attract ground squirrels. Ground squirrels dig burrows, which of course make homes for burrowing owls. And the red-tailed hawk keeps those populations of burrow-benefiting species to healthy levels. Here, red-tailed hawk is grabbing a ground squirrel. Red-shouldered hawk, in similar fashion, patrols the creeks in our county, and it'll eat smaller birds and smaller mammals along the creek. Cooper's hawk is yet another predator, quite fond of visiting backyard feeders and in residential areas, where it may take a bath in the water basin, or it may actually grab one of the birds near your feeders. One of its favorite foods is the mourning dove, named for its mournful call, which I'm sure is familiar to you. It's a beautiful long-tailed dove, and it's famous for choosing precarious places for its website, including this particularly poor choice of making a nest on a ceiling fan. The house finch, another seed-eating species, also enjoys insects. Seed-eating species are responsible for spreading seeds of plants. So they don't destroy, they don't swallow all the seeds, they don't crush them all, but they do cast a lot off, which then propagate. This is the female. The lesser goldfinch, particularly fond of thistle, both native and non-native. So it spreads those seeds as well. You might be wondering why there are so many kinds of birds, particularly these smaller ones that look structurally very similar. Well, as a good example, the boreal forests of Canada are home to dozens of North American warblers. Those warblers feed side by side in the same tree, and yet they've segregated themselves, they've isolated themselves to a certain portion of the tree. The Cape May at the very top, the yellow-rumped warbler at the bottom, and the bay-breasted and the black-throated green in the interior. Now, on a related situation, the Darwin finches all originated from a single ancestor. But when they arrived on Galapagos Islands, they found niches that hadn't been occupied yet. There were opportunities that were not being exploited. So after time, actually a fairly accelerated time period, this single ancestor diversified into multiple forms. Those forms became full species as they drifted genetically. And you could see the extremes from the big nut-crunching bird on the upper left to the small insectivore that eats bugs and ants on the lower right. Now, if you zoom out a bit and you look at the class of birds as a whole, you're going to see a huge variety of bill adaptations that are optimized for certain kinds of foraging. And we notice it particularly in our shorebirds. We have three species of shorebirds here, the godwit on the left, the curlew in the foreground, and the whimbrel on the far right. Nature abhors, tends to avoid direct competition. So these three species have different ways of capturing food because of the morphology of their bills and their foraging styles. So that is why on a mudflat, thousands of shorebirds, similar looking shorebirds, can feed side by side without directly competing. So nothing is wasted. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some of the negative effects of climate change because it affects the ecology in a serious way, particularly seasonal resources. Now, in winter, coffeeberry produces these food sources for birds, primarily thrushes, but many birds will eat the coffee berries. And of course, summertime is for caterpillars. So we have lots of insects that are producing larvae, which feed on the leaves and then produce food for the young birds. But nesting material is also a commodity, and warbling vireo has to locate the right material in the right location. These are all affected by climate change. Seasonal conditions, of course, go hand in hand with climate change. We toggle in California from mud to flood. And this makes it difficult and uncertain whether cliff swallows, who make their nests out of mud, will be able to make their nest. Either the mud will be completely covered with water or it will be non-existent because of a drought. And this, of course, impacts migration. The cliff swallow, again, spends the majority of its spring and summer in North America. In the winter, it migrates to South America. And of course, this brings with it a critical scheduling challenge. If you look at this animation, you'll see the birds beginning in the far south, moving upward. The jerky animation kind of highlights the fact that there are stops on this journey from north to south and vice versa. On every stop in that journey, the cliff swallow has to find the resources it's come to rely on. The ancient relationships between birds and plants and animals are important, and they are jeopardized by climate change. The red knot is a perfect example. On the Atlantic coast, the red knot migrates north along the eastern seaboard, and when it arrives in Delaware Bay, it coincides with sometimes the very same day that the horseshoe crab emerges from the depths and spawns. When it does that, it produces literally trillions of eggs. Those eggs are then consumed by the red knot and other shorebirds that have learned over thousands of years that this happens reliably on a specific date. Timing is everything, of course. Imagine you're on a long journey that you've taken before, a road trip perhaps, and you're counting on this road stop, this rest stop that you've been to before, and you find now that it's out of business. There's no gasoline, there's no food, there's no restroom. You're out of luck. And that's what happens to birds. Climate change can shift arrival dates and resources out of sync, and migratory species are especially at risk. You have only to look at the checklist of birds to see that birds have different life cycles. They have different patterns of presence in our county. Common yellowthroat is a resident. The three warblers in the center are spring migrants, and the warbler at the bottom is a wintering migrant. They're not here year-round, and the period of time that presents the greatest challenges is during the migration. So that would be either spring or fall, when they're coming or going. Some of the birds that I am concerned about are Wilson's warbler from Mexico, Allen's hummingbird, also from Mexico, Bullock's oriole from Central America, and hooded oriole from Central America. Black-headed grosbeak as well from the tropics, and western tanager. All these birds come here in spring to breed. All of them face challenges when diversity is down and climate change compounds that. So think about the relationships that exist between birds and plants, birds and other animals, birds and birds. Think also about the phainopepla. This is an uncommon bird in our county, and it has a strong relationship with mistletoe. It eats the mistletoe, it nests in the mistletoe, and it poops the mistletoe out. And those sticky seeds then stick to the branches and encourage the expansion of mistletoe in an oak community. So where the mistletoe exists, the phainopepla thrives. Where the phainopepla thrives, mistletoe clearly exists. The rufous-crowned sparrow has an intimate relationship with rocky slopes covered with artemisia. If the artemisia is missing, or if the rocky slopes wash away because of flood and climate change, we have a problem, and so does the rufous-crowned sparrow. The belted kingfisher relies on clear, rushing water to find its food, its fish. If it can't find it, it'll move on, and if it moves on, we don't know whether it'll find what it's looking for. The brown pelican is almost always accompanied by Heermann's gulls, which crowd the larger bird in hopes that maybe it will drop some fish. They're found together. Usually the Heermann's gull benefits a lot, and the brown pelican really isn't bothered. It catches plenty of fish on its own. And this kind of relationship exists between seabirds and marine mammals as well. The marine mammals are clearly finding enough food, and when they surface and drive the fish toward the surface, the birds are able to pick it up and it's a win situation for the birds and basically a neutral situation for the whales. Nature abhors a vacuum is what I accidentally suggested earlier. This means, of course, that every opportunity that exists, every opportunity to exploit a resource exists naturally. Birds naturally evolve to occupy various niches. Now, if an opportunity or if a relationship between birds and nature is broken, or a portion of that web is pulled, that ecology is weakened. So we really need to have a natural setting where the full complement of birds occupying each niche is present. Otherwise, the web becomes weakened. So if you want to see some of the birds that I've talked about here, there are a couple of places that I recommend. There's Eulestack Natural Area, which is just a mile or two from your office here, and Baylands, Sunnyvale Baylands Park also, just rather close. Eulestack is a wonderful area for birding. It's filled with native plants. It's a beautiful landscape, and it has layers and layers of both native plants and non-native plants, but it's primarily native, which of course promotes the growth of pollinators and natural relationships between species, between birds and bugs and plants, etc. In Sunnyvale Baylands is a wonderful place for a picnic lunch. It's a relaxing walk around the periphery. It'll take you through trees where you can see a variety of birds in these eucalyptus and of course the native oaks, etc. I prefer the adjoining ponds in Sunnyvale Water Pollution Control ponds. In the fall and winter, these ponds fill up with hundreds and thousands of waterfowl and shorebirds. And you really get to see the magnificent swarms of birds in this area. Of course, there's also raptors and eagles and terns and gulls. It's a wonderful place. A short walk beyond the radar tower brings you close to the bay, where you can observe the egrets in a very natural setting. And if any of this interests you, if you're curious about the birds around us and how they fit together with other life forms, I encourage you to join one of our field trips or sign up for a BioBlitz. Because at those events, you're going to see a variety of life. You'll see tons of birds, you'll see mammals, you'll see plants, you'll see insects, all somehow related to one another, all somehow reliant on each other. So give it a chance. Sign up for one of our trips, become a member, support our organization, and see the wonder of biodiversity firsthand. Thank you.